guys are potentially looking at some hires here in the next little bit. Angie, are you rebooting on your hire goals for next year? Hello. Hi. Thanks for coming down.
No, thank you. I switched coaches and the challenge is I kept trying to hire to solve my problems instead of leaning into systems and models and I love my new coach because she will not let me hire until I build what it is. I have to decide what I need and then I have to hire the person to bring that. And in the process of doing that, I've actually eliminated the need to hire right now.
Great.
So,
cool. Yeah.
I don't know. We'll keep working through it and we'll see.
Yeah, it's very weird because normally I have my org chart built out of what it is, what it needs to look like at the next level, and kind of vision out the next 1 to 3, 5 years. Me and Jonny spent a lot of time on this. But I just think this is the weird anomaly year because I don't fully know. We have some good idea vision-wise by the end of next year what we think AI will replace for us. And we're very active. Like Caton, Jojo, Jonny, like they're just nerds hacking away all day, every day. So they're way smarter than me. But it is interesting on how fast it's moving. And I just think it's going to just jack with all of our org charts, our traditional org charts. And I think hopefully, it will just make us more efficient. You might need a little less employee, expense to still operate. Even Gordon recommended a podcast. Linda McKissick and Dana Gentry have a podcast. They just interviewed a guy kind of on all the changes in the industry, and just what some of the vision is. And we're not through all this stuff. And there could be more bad parts. There could be good parts out of this. Everything's getting challenged. Like this is going to get drug out. The OPs have several masterminds. We think it'll probably be another 5 to 7 years before everything's finally like the new normal. But then the second thing is if it's done right and we capitalize on it, we could actually make a lot more money the next couple of years because of some of these changes. Even Clay was mentioning that in our financial meeting. Like our BAC's actually gone up, not down recently as far as our team goes. So it's interesting. And one of the things, even AI, I've just had to train myself to stop asking humans the questions I normally ask humans. I have to default to going to ChatGPT or the app because the answers I get when I have an attorney appointment, I'll jump on and ask the exact same questions to ChatGPT. Bailey is my name of it. She gave me permission to name it, my favorite assistant back in the day. But then I'll ask my attorney, and I'm getting probably 80% better answers out of ChatGPT. It's weird right now. So yeah, it's thrown me for a loop a little bit. So normally what I like to do in this course, all of you know me, I've just been involved in hiring in a lot of different organizations. When I was in Shoney's role, held, hundreds and thousands of recruiting appointments, which kind of honed my thing. I even had my first Tony Robbins coaching call, just again, diving deep into the disc and how much time I spent on the disc, but it's still a decent tool. KW, if you don't know, we used to have a company called Corporate Consulting that we were paying about $7 to $8 million a year for exclusivity in their behavioral assessments and their consulting programs as far as how to hire the right people for the right spots on the bus. Eventually, we just went down that road for so long. Bain Henyon was one of the original consultants that was pretty dang integral in Gary getting out of his own way and bringing in Mo and some other positions that just blew up our growth. Had Gary stayed in just the lane he thought he was supposed to be in, we'd be a fraction of the size. So I think self-recognition, self-awareness, all that, who do you have to be to go attract talent is very important. So I go through some of those things. Oftentimes our top producers come to me and say, hey, I got to hire this. I need him to do this, and this. I want it to be a 10 person, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, why would a 10 come want to work with you? And they usually get a little offended, but I'm like, you have to be a 10 or an 11 if you're going to attract a 10, So most of the time when you think you're not making the right hires or you're missing something or something's not working and you keep hitting your head on that ceiling, a lot of times that's your fault, not the external of what you're bringing in. And we'll go through some of that stuff. We'll talk about talent a little bit, but I love the KPA tool. And there's just a barrier and a wall of just lack of knowing what it is, how to use it. People are somewhat intimidated by the KPA for some reason. And so I even just like to quickly walk through the KPA as if I was interviewing myself or, going through it and kind of some of the things I look for just to make more people familiar with it. So it increases the chance that you'll use it. So that's usually how I like to do this. But if you want to go a different direction, we've got, hour and 15-ish or so. So, you guys know my track record. Team leader is really where I honed a lot of the skill set. It's been weird for me in the regional director role of just, a different version of that. Even my Argentina stuff, the KPA didn't necessarily work with native Spanish speakers. It kind of broke the thing. So we had to go do some of the other assessments, but I still career visioned all my Argentina people, which it was interesting to do it for a foreign country, and it was still pretty dang successful, but it's the process that's important. I always have that in here, just kind of the world, and I always like to say that my most treasured skill that I learned from Keller Williams was how to recognize talent, how to have great business plans, and put those talented people on the right seats of the bus. And I've used it pretty much everywhere. And every time I've made a mistake or something's blown up in my life, I usually can trace it back to me making a mistake in the hiring process, or me delegating something out that I should not have delegated out. And even when we went through a rough patch of turnover of KW leadership, that's something that even Gary owned in a private meeting with us. He's just like, I just learned that I will just never be able to outsource the most important positions in my world because it's so vital for me to get those right. But you got to outsource some, I get it. Let me turn this off. This is a peek behind Novalee's secret wall of secrets. This is what the KPA actually looks like when you order it. Every job description, I just hired a personal assistant / nanny, and I made the majority of them take the KPA. They thought it was so weird to make them take a behavioral assessment to, watch little Violet a few days a week. But I just think it's so important to take it so I can just kind of see who they are, and then walking through the process, whether you go fast or slow, the most important positions, you got to go slow through it. But this is what it looks like. So when we go in and order it, only Novalee usually can order KPAs. There's usually one person that has the login to do it. Eventually, it will be mixed into command a lot better, where agents will be able to order it on their own. The biggest thing is until you've gone through the leverage series and career visioning, they don't want to let you see some of the stuff because then people use it in a cheating fashion. And primarily what I'm talking about is when we order a KPA, it always spits out two reports. It spits out the personal report, spits out the job fit report. Personal report is just a very generic about them. There's no right or wrong or whatever. And most of the time you don't want them to think that there is a right or wrong. But what the job fit report does is it matches up their behavior against the huge chunk of data we have on successful people in those roles and what their behavior is. It will do a percentage match of their probability of success, basically. And normally I'm pretty confident in them. I've seen a few that I'm like, that doesn't make sense, and I'll have someone retake it. But it spits out this. So it kind of gives you the scores or the fits. So like you can see when I took this, I was 100% match for the OP role, which clearly I've gone backwards if you talk to Jonny and Novalee. Productivity coach, team leader, mega agent, all those sort of things. And you can kind of just see their match. And then you can go click here. Novalee can pull the job fit report against any position. So if you order the job, the KPA, and say, hey, it's for director of operations, we can see the results. And later down the road, you're like, hey, I'm interested in hiring them as a director of sales or a mortgage person or whatever. We can just simply go re-pull that accurate report, and you can go back through that report for that. Okay. Do you have a question? Okay. But normally until you go through the class, we just don't show this to you. And they might even be changing this slightly because even though we warn you, we tell you, job fits for the consultant only, the person that's hiring people still just cheat the process. They go directly to this job match and they're like, oh, 97%, I don't have to interview them anymore. I'm just going to hire them. That is just such a small piece of the job. And unless you're walking through the KPA, you're messing up the process on that. So they might even pull some of this job match stuff away just because agents are not doing it the right way.
Does it change at all if it's ordered for a different job?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, same results. It's just the first report it will kick out is the one that you ordered it for. Yep. Every once in a while, they'll add jobs. They're going through a whole overhaul right now. Mark Willis was giving us a little bit of insight at the last regional director meeting, but he built an entire company after he stepped out of the CE on just behavioral assessments and leadership, programs and stuff. So he really loves this. We're due for an overhaul on it. I don't think a lot of stuff's going to change, but I think it will just update it, simplify it, make it a little easier, less cumbersome. So, but normally if they add a new job, you can just refresh results and it will pull it up under a new name or org chart position. So, okay. So these are three things, like I said. Who do you have to be to attract talent? Understanding talent, and then we'll just walk through the KPA a bit, okay? So number one, let's just have a quick discussion on that. Who do you have to be to attract talent? Not even who do you have to be, but if you were to join a company and directly work for someone, I know you're all independent contractors for the most part, so you guys are free-spirited souls. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want. But if you were to go be a full-time, employee for someone, like who would the leader have to be to attract you? Like what would you want in that person for you to just say, yep, I'm strapping my, wagon to this person?
I'd want to see that they've accomplished it. That they're having current success and past success. That's exciting. It paints a pretty clear picture of, or filling in some of the picture of where I'm hoping to go.
Yeah. Track record for sure. So much easier to lead someone through something they did, not just say that they can do, right?
I want to know that they care about my development, my growth. Along with that.
Yep, I always say there's two. There's the leaders that are there for the people, and then there's the leaders that the people are there for them. And there's a giant difference, and you fill up pretty quickly. Yep.
Kind of goes hand in hand with like they want me to grow, but I can see that they're actively growing themselves. They're really open to doing what they need to grow.
Yeah. And if you're an achiever, it's like every 5-10 years, I have to just shake my head, erase a bunch of things, and I'm like, what does the next 1, 3, 5 years of growth totally look like? For you to go just change your life and become an awesome person, like that gets you to here, and then you got to go do the whole same work, same process to take you to that next level. Someone like Boyd's been impressive for me, just because he was a stud when we got in business, but it's like the growth of him over the last 10 years has been one of my favorite traits of him, where some leaders, once they get to a certain level, they get leverage, they get income, they kind of just stop, and then they coast and they get complacent. I think everybody's probably been there at different phases, but yeah, it's the consistent growth of leveling up that I would need. Anybody else? Okay, we'll go through a few of these things. What does talent want? Same thing. We kind of mentioned some of that stuff. I always just wanted to make a ton of money. I want to consistently be moving. I wanted to make a huge impact on whatever business. I wanted the purpose to be tied to it. But I also wanted to have fun. Like I want to be around people that I like. I wanted to be in a great environment. But here's, how we get stuck in the middle. On the right is massive success. On the left is complete failure. Most people are just right there, average. To get to the middle of life at anything, all you have to do is what you like to do. If you want to get to the right side of average at anything that really matters to you, you must move past what you want to do and do some things you don't want to do. In other words, the measure of your success in life is in direct proportion to what you're willing to do when you don't want to do it. Tentative effort leads to tentative outcomes. Therefore, give yourself fully to your endeavors. Decide to construct your character through excellent actions and determine to pay the price of a worthy goal. The trials you encounter will introduce you to your strengths. Remain steadfast, and one day you will build something that endures, something worthy of your potential. And this is some of the things that Gary shared with us a handful of masterminds ago, just on being your authentic self and just leveling up your own life. But destiny is a future scenario. My destiny is my future scenario. Destiny is not a matter of chance. It is a matter of choice. It is not a thing to be waited for. It is a thing to be achieved. Destiny is a decision I make. My destiny awaits my decisions. Authenticity is simple. It is when my values and beliefs are mirrored by my thoughts, emotions, words, and actions. When my mission and vision for my life are powered by my values and beliefs, and these manifested into specific thoughts, emotions, words, and actions, I am living my authentic self and my best life possible. I was talking to, I think, Jonny Novely about this the other day, but when you really are trying to go make an impact in someone's life and coach them and just get more out of them than they themselves, like I really feel like there's just two things you have to marry up. And even all the recruiting appointments, coaching appointments, like not to fill my own balloon, but like I feel like I got pretty good at it. And to me was, you got to say the right things. Like you got to prepare, you got to know the models, the systems. Like even Gary Keller, like he's not just smarter than people, but he's just more prepared than people. He does more work coming into the same meeting that everybody else in the meeting does. So by default, when you get in the meeting, he ends up with a microphone more because it was just preparation, not because he knew all of it, and that's when you coast into things winging it, that puts you at a disadvantage of just not having all the right things to say. So you got to understand what the right answers are. Even when Gary says one sentence, that one sentence can be pulled out and it turns into a quote and a t-shirt and all those things, right? So that's important. But what's also equally important is true authenticity in communication and transparency. So like it shows up very honest and earnest and like they believe you, right? And when you marry those two things, that is where you inspire and motivate people to just totally another level. Like if you just love them and empathy and authenticity, but you're not saying the right things, you're just going to misdirect them, right? You're saying all the right things, but you don't have the authenticity and transparency, they're just going to think you're a know-it-all, just words coming out of your mouth, and they're never going to take the emotional action to go do it, So those two things. And if you don't feel like you're speaking with authenticity, like that's where some of this work that you got to go do to attract those high talented people. Mission, vision, values, beliefs, perspectives. This is number one. If you're a leader or you have a business and you're wanting to go bring someone into it, like good luck finding a talented person if you have no purpose and vision, or mission statement that they're buying into. So many people are willing to take a step backwards to take that leap forward if they feel like they're getting into the rocket ship of your business, right? And if you don't know where you're going, there's no way you're going to get them to buy in to the organization's direction. And even if you feel like you've done this great at different times, it's happened to me too. Sometimes you fall asleep at the wheel and you've got to go back and do the work and spend the time to re-clarify the vision. And I think this is a great time of year right now, the fourth quarter, but specifically rolling into 2025. I really think the market's going to be awesome next year, way better than this year. But also when you look at the technology advancements, AI, this is the year to reinvent your vision of what you're wanting to go do the next 5-10 years. Personality, while important, is rarely the indicator of success. Personality is potential. A study by the Cornell School of Industry and Labor Relations found that self-awareness, not personality, is the strongest predictor of a successful career. Knowing your own strengths and weaknesses enables you to work with others who have different skills and experiences. Self-awareness also allows us to more readily accept ideas and perspectives that differ from what we know or think can have value. Conversely, a lack of self-awareness comes off as rigidity, stubbornness, or an inattractability that alienates others. Personality is not the number one contributor. It is what? Self-awareness. And some of you probably made the mistakes I have. Cameron and I, we always love the hungry, humble, smart as the three requirements. Hungry, they're ambitious, they're hungry, they just know how to go work. Humble is not just they're, meek and humble, but they're teachable and continuously teachable. Ego disease is such an illness in our industry. They'll reach success and then they just will cap out. You want to be able to see into someone that they're always going to be willing to grow. But the other big one, hungry, humble, smart, is smart, not just intelligence, but they are aware of their behavior. And until you bring someone into your organization that is not aware of their behavior, you have no idea how toxic it can be to your culture that could almost cripple an entire company, one person. And Cam, even when we were growing the team, like we made a couple of those mistakes, and adding up the number of the cost of that is a big number sometimes, for sure. 95%, this is so funny, 95% of people believe they are self-aware, but only about 10 to 15% of people really are. Who in here thinks they're self-aware? Just kidding. The more power a leader holds, the more likely they are to overestimate their skills and abilities. One study of more than 3,600 leaders across a variety of roles, industries found that relative to lower level leaders, higher level leaders more significantly overvalue their skills. In fact, this pattern existed for 19 out of the 20 competencies the researchers measured, including emotional self-awareness, accurate self-assessment, empathy, trustworthiness, and leadership performance. So a lot of times if you think you're self-aware, you probably need to be even more self-aware, right? I think that's one of the biggest issues in politics in our country and probably even on the planet is the overestimation of skills and abilities, right? It's almost like if they admit weaknesses or challenges they face, they just get murdered in the news, which is just not okay. Or if someone changes their mind due to some growth they've had and they change a position on it, everybody just attacks them. I'm like, that's part of growth, right? This is the counter thing is people rarely speak truth to power. No one wants to tell the emperor they have no clothes. The only way a leader can gain true self-awareness is by examining their own beliefs, thoughts, actions, strengths, and weaknesses, and working to know themselves and better themselves. The more I work on myself, the better I can be, my results can be, my career can be, my business can be, my life can be. Know thyself is an imperative directive for anyone who wants to maximize their potential and live their best life. For a decade in the team leader role, I would come to Nova Lee and I'd say, hey, where can I improve? Where can I do better? What mistakes am I making? And she'd always like, you're doing the best job ever. And I'm like, I'm the best team leader. It'd go to my head. Just kidding. She was very honest with me always. But the problem is when you have an employee or when you have people that consider you like a boss, a manager, a leader, or whatever, very unlikely that they're going to be authentic on where you need to improve. So you've got to figure out where those relationships can be friends, can be coaches you hire, can be peers that aren't in your business with you. You've got to have at least 5 to 10 of those people that are at your level or higher that are also willing to give you insight on where you might be lacking self-awareness. Self-assessment. This is just like a random thing I do every year. My strengths, my weaknesses, what should I do more of? What should I do less of? My superpowers are all the things leading up to the retreat, the self-assessments. It's trying to just ask yourself the right questions to give you a little bit more insight on, where you might need to improve. And we can share all these slides with you too. We can send those out. So let's just talk about talent. You are who you surround yourself with. If you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with in business, your level of success is going to be the average of the 5 people you hire. I know some of you have heard me say this, but just my kids going from like elementary school to teenagers, like my Madden and crew going to 13 and 14, like once you cross 12 years old, that's the parental threshold where they no longer take your advice and all of their advice comes from their peer group, right? And it was a pretty dramatic change for me. And so that was my wake-up call. I'm like, I got to be very engaged who they're hanging out with because they're no longer listening to me. I've got to control who's in their life to whatever extent that I can, because it became very important that they had the right influences to develop on a better trajectory, right? But it's weird that I hold the bar so high for my kids and then I'll go hang out with some losers, that are bringing me down. So like you have to do self-assessment. I know we have long-term relationships. We got family that sometimes we inherit. But again, the majority of the time, you got to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with the right people. And that was the number one reason that we created the More Club. A lot of the things is to just get out the noise and just force ourselves to be around the right people. And if I've done anything wrong the last couple of years is I just kind of was just isolating myself just to crank and do stuff. And when I've been doing some of my self-assessments, I realized I'm like, I just got to go back to doing some of the simple meetings that I've taken off my calendar, of team meetings or my red sign meeting or whatever, just because being in there, you might not get something every time, but even that one time a month that your light bulb goes off and something gets reinforced, I'm like, gosh, that's what I needed, and I'm a very big advocate that the more I isolate myself, the worse version of myself I am. These people that work from home, cool, like maybe you're sort of the same level productive, I don't know, but it's the growth and it's just you getting in kind of a zone where you just cut off those positive influences, the gym, relationships, all those things, no matter what area of life. Owning a job versus owning a business. I do it, then we do it, they do it, and then theirs. I've been all those phases. I did it, then we start doing it, and then I hired people, and then they did it. Even the next level of just them having their bench, of whoever you got, they've got their leverage. But every level I've learned when I've been able to pull out or when I have to kind of come in or what tasks or systems I can't delegate because it's still important for the business owner to have the vision. I realized very quickly, even having an empire of a bunch of businesses, the second I die, none of those businesses are going to keep me in there. Like every one of them are just going to replace my ownership and have to go find someone else to have a positive impact on that. Succeed at they, expand your vision. You guys get this principle. You go hire someone. So Mark Willis, back in the day, the first version when he was a CEO, so that was, I don't know what years that was, maybe early 2000s or something, he became CEO. And when Gary's like, what do you want? Instead of just offering him a comp plan, he's like, I want a very clear path. I can make $1 million every single year as CEO of Keller Williams. And this was when we were really smaller, probably 20 something years ago. And Gary was not offended at that whatsoever. He just had to go back in his room and reverse engineer for him to make $1 million. What does the organization have to look like and grow, whatever, that people do that exact opposite. Most of the time they'll say, this is the compensation. How do I get the best talent willing to accept this? And I think part of that is just that KPA process really dives into what is important to them. And oftentimes you project what's important to you onto them, and you never know what's actually important to them until you do that exercise. But the main underlying principle is your vision, your world, or your future world has to be big enough. That bubble has to be big enough to expand the people inside of yours vision, right? And that's even where I don't know why I'm going on these tangents. Is this recorded? Like Ben Kinney and Gary, like they were homies. They're not. They're kind of medium homies right now. I wish they would have just figured out a better way to partner up. And Ben still is an incredible KW advocate. He still owns 9 franchises, but at one point or another, Ben just decided that he had to go broker agnostic instead of just building his business inside of Keller Williams. He wanted to be able to attract other companies, agents to their team or their technology or whatever. Gary thought that he could do all of that still within Keller Williams, and that was kind of one of the major division points. But I think they could have figured it out. Gary has a very, very big vision out there. But that's one of the things Gary said when we were in a mastermind years ago. You got the top 200 teams, rainmakers, individual producers in the room that are just rock stars. Gary always comes in, sometimes we'll mastermind, sometimes Gary's just pouring out value. But that's one of the things he said right out the gates. He's like, this room is my favorite room. He's like, this is the room that I feel like I'm surrounded by my equals. A lot of these rainmakers are just entrepreneurial, grinders, maverick, don't follow the path, trailblazers. Like that's really what Gary is. When you think about a lot of our principles like ALC, cap structure, profit share, all those things we created, and it was like loud, and people hated Keller Williams when we started those things 20 years ago. Virtually every company's copied that and tried to do it better. But again, Gary just always is looking down the road 10, 20 years. But when he came in the room, he said, this is my favorite room. The only difference why you guys are down there and I'm up on the stage is because I think bigger. I think bigger. So whatever you're thinking and however big you think bigger. He's like, okay, now then think bigger. Now then think bigger, right? So again, your world, you just have to have a giant vision, or you just have to be willing to accept the consequences of settling at whatever level that you choose to settle at, right? You can be everything to 6 people. You can't be everything to 200,000 people, but even org chart wise, you've got to have an org chart that still allows the org chart to flow up, that you have 5, 6, 7 people max, leadership, coaching, consulting wise, that are reporting up. And as soon as you start getting to 10, 20, 30, like even when I would coach our More Club, like I would recruit, I would help run our staff with Novalee, and then I would try to coach our More Club. That's pretty much my job description that I had to narrow it down when I was team leader. You can't effectively coach on a quarterly basis or even on a monthly basis. I would call those more check-ins with Angie's business or Cameron's business, or like, quarterly wealth building consultation. Like coaching is you're so intimately plugged into their week to week and what they're doing that you're making small incremental changes that truly can like make huge outcomes. You can't do that to 30 people. It's so hard unless your full-time job is coaching. So that's why I said, all right, who are my 5, 6 people that are running the companies? But as your company grows, who are the 5 or 6 people that report to Gary? They're pretty dang high level, right? Rock stars. Talent. What is talent? We say that word so often in KW. What does that mean? And how do you know? Like, what are they doing to be talent?
I think sometimes you can see talent in somebody when, I think you can see hidden talent when, I'm thinking like athletics, like if someone does a layup, like there's certain like moves that they make when they're going up for the layup that looks athletic.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, like I could see you like dunking it or like shooting a 3-pointer or blocking somebody because of what I just saw right there. And sometimes they like don't see it in themselves, and they need to like be reminded or see the vision of. That's what comes to my mind.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from talent wants help accountable. Talent wants to be driven. Like they want somebody. They want to get better. They want to be held accountable. They want to go get it, but they want somebody actually to hold them accountable for that, like that ability.
They run to accountability. Yeah. Mikhail?
Yeah, I think what I've seen with talent, at least personally, is not anybody can be talented, but it's very hard, like you said earlier, about being self-aware. So you can have people that are incredibly talented, but if they can't be coachable, they can't be self-aware, they can't be grateful or humble or any of those things, then it's really hard to scale them.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people can be incredibly talented, but that doesn't mean that they're actually going to be successful because of some of their core deficiencies they have.
Yeah. Anybody else? Like this is the main chart they show. Talent, find solutions. Non-talent brings you problems. Talent shares your goals and fulfills your needs as a natural byproduct of fulfilling their own. Non-talent does not fulfill your needs or ends up giving you back pieces of the job. It's one of the things I've noticed is just you got to adequately train them. You got to adequately give them the right environment and resources and the freedom to go execute their job. But if constantly after you've done those things, they keep bringing you pieces of their job back, that's always a big sign for me. Non-talent doesn't know what they want and isn't searching. I don't think everybody's really clear on their purpose or their exact mission statement, but they usually aren't so far off. They're not moving in the right direction. Talent knows what they want and is actively searching to know it. Non-talent requires pushing. Talent pushes you. And I know life happens. Everybody's got stuff that's popped up, especially as you get older. But when you set some expectations and then you're having to reset them constantly, it's usually a lack of personal accountability, I've noticed. Non-talent, talent is continually raising the bar. Like they're just always looking for things to improve versus just coasting on what they already put together. Whereas non-talent may not know where the existing bar is set or even what bar you're talking about. One of Mo's favorite questions in the hiring process, just since your last formal education, high school, college, what are the things that you're most proud of? And she basically, if someone didn't have anything to say, that was a reflection of non-talent, whatever it is. But if they had things that they were proud of, it's because they probably put their heart and work into things on raising the bar on something. Non-talent doesn't care who they spend time with and repels talent from them. I'll tell you, a lot of talent, our top people, they like to participate in charity and giving and teaching and whatnot, but we're pretty clear as a staff how many times we can ask you to teach Ignite or how many times we can ask you to come into this class or whatever, because eventually you spend too much time in that, it burns you out and it starts having a bad outcome in your own business. So I love that. I always say this, I don't know what book it's actually from, but some book said a third of your time with people above you, third of the time you should be spending with people at your level, masterminding, peers, and then a third people below you that you're helping pull up. Kind of a balance between those. You spend too much time with people above you, you're burning them out and you don't know it. And then if you spend too much time with people below you, that's where you could get burnt out and you look up and you're just like, I want to quit everything and move to Dubai or whatever. Non-talent, when they try to talk action and results, they can't back it up. Talent talks a language of actions and results. Gary's first discipline in his Quantum Leap, if you remember his areas of life and then some disciplines in there, his very first one, which I ignored for first 10 years, but it's been very important to me the last 5 years, is the reality habit. Just get real, get real, get real. Whatever happens in life, whatever shows up, are you getting real or are you just creating a fairy tale in your head, especially when it comes to your own behavior and what you contributed to a mess or, success or whatever. And there's people that just talk rhetoric, especially when we have very high promotional behaviored agents. We got a good chunk that are very high promotional salespeople, but sometimes their mouth moves faster than their brain does. I'm not talking about a specific partner I have, but you got to be careful, right? Like you've got to make sure that you're getting real first, then you're finding the solution. What was that quote that I texted out? I thought it was a great one. It was from, here, I'll find it. It's from Steve Jobs. He said, if you define the problem correctly, you almost have the solution. So even just clarity on the problem you're pretty dang close to already having the solution. But because people, they run away from reality, they're not clearly identifying the problem, and they just jump to trying to find the solution. Good luck. Like you're going to be a lot farther off from having the solution for it. Okay, these are the three choices of talent. Potential talent has the knowledge, skills, personality, and culture. Emerging has the knowledge, skills, personality, and culture. They haven't done the job yet, but they have done the right job before it. So some sort of correlating job that really shows a track record of success, and they have all the skills, personality, culture to go accomplish it. Proven has the knowledge, skills, personality, and culture with a track record of success in the job. I kind of love to stay in that emerging talent role. It's kind of medium affordability. You're not totally positive they're going to crush the job description, but there's a pretty good educated hypothesis that that they will, right? Whereas potential, you might see them with a lot of potential, but they also could be a total waste of talent. You've probably met a bunch of those. Proven usually just consistently can show up. They have a track record. It increases the probability of success. They're also the highest paid from the beginning. The other risk is, burnout. Someone that's proven talent for 30 years might not show up as proven talent here. We've had a lot of mega agents transfer from other states where they were a mega agent, rock star. They come into a recruiting appointment, and in our mind, we're like, they're a $20 million producer. Capper, ding, hit the bell. And I think I'm up to 0 of them have been able to rebuild what they had somewhere else here. So part of that is just like, were they really proven talent, or did they just have momentum and time on the job that created, great SOI? I don't know. So that's the problem with sometimes proven talent. You can see dollars versus knowledge, skills right there. Emerging talent is the sweetest spot, more predictable than potential talent, and wiser long-term investment than spending money on proven talent. Okay, any comments on that? What are some things that stuck out to you? I know some of you have heard some of those. What was different?
The part on self-awareness, you mentioned that somebody that wasn't self-aware could kind of kill a company, and then you kind of went into leadership with it. What about, I don't know, what about agents you've had, something like that? You talked about kind of the culture there. How do you know if somebody's self-aware or not? Is that just time on the job and then face-to-face conversations?
It's interesting to me. So it's a great question. I think it's interesting to me that some of the best talent, like clearly when you have initial conversations, like when they're me, or I, or what do I get, or, even when you talk about compensation and stuff like that, some of the most talented people go so far down the road with me before we even remember to talk about compensation. Like they're just what they're going to be doing, who they're going to be doing it with, the impact they're going to be having, like the culture around the company. Somehow those things in their mind of order of priority, those things always end up getting discussed first. Then what I make. I know everybody's got to make money and they got to have a good comp plan, but they're looking for the organization and the leader to buy into. And I think just whether they've been trained or it's happened in the past, or it's just something inside of them being talent or inherently like driven people, is they always just know money will be that natural byproduct. Like even Boyd, I think I was already in the job for 2 weeks before I actually knew what I was making as a team leader. But that's also Boyd's, they see if they show up and work for free for a while or something. I don't know. I think that's one. I don't know. What else do you guys comes to mind of like even agent base? I think commitment, I think them just knowing they want to go all in on it, even our leadership, I've been kind of trying to transition some of our leadership that are fantastic leaders, but they're in a legacy position and they're more kind of looking back the last 10 years than they're looking up at building something the next 10 years. So I think even just gauging their ambition of kind of what all they want to go accomplish the next 10 years, and does it feel real versus it feeling just like the next step or the next job or something. I think a lot of talent and agents, they have an inherent desire. Everybody gets in a little bit for the money. Like I know that was important to me, but somehow you're realizing they just like to help people, like that's something me and Clay always got along with, is he loves people and he wants to do the best job. And his biggest fear is him messing something up, And that always came before money. He's a cheapskate, but that's always like after the fact, Growth, I think growth or a know-it-all, you always get those people that just, like, they've got an answer for everything versus they've learned to just sit back and just, observe and watch and learn. I don't know. Angie, what do you think?
Just thinking about like when we did before the KPA, the disc was a big deal, right? And sitting down and going through the disc, how when you're talking with someone, if they're like surprised or like validated or how it shows up from in a negative way, like the pieces that I was so surprised when we went through the disc and through the KPA, and you're just like, well, how did it know me better than I did? How did it know I was going to be out of gas every day? Like, how did it know, like, those things?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm trying to think if that was such a.
So you're saying that shows that they're not self-aware?
Yeah, well, it's so interesting because I felt like that was such a good question, and it's really, I've been sitting over here like thinking on your question. It's like that is a really powerful question. If I went to even people on my team or myself, how would I consider this self-awareness, or if I am or am not? I don't know. I think that's a money question that could be really valuable if you work through what development. I was curious your opinion of it because you hired so much. What that would look like for you in knowing if you had to rank somebody on their own personal self-awareness as to their strengths and their weaknesses, or how stuff shows up for them, what that would look like.
I'm not even sure. I mean, a lot of it for us comes down to spouses. That'll tell you a lot, at least for us. If we don't have great relationships with the spouses, or we can tell there's some concerns there, that's like number one concern for us, really, honestly.
Sorry, what do you mean that they don't have a good relationship?
Yeah, like, the relationship's not great. Like the way they vibe with how we interact, or how they interact with the other wives. Like that's a big tell for us. Typically, too, is how the spouses are with us and with their spouse, and how they would integrate with our current wives.
I think some of the questions we'll go through the form, but the thought-provoking questionnaire that you go through, just on the way their brain works, that probably is the most insightful specifically to determining this. And some of those questions in there, like what type of relationship would you like to have with your manager? What type of relationship would you like to have with your coworkers? What's your ideal work environment? Even the ones that are like, who do you admire and why? I think those are sometimes like when you ask those questions and you can tell their brain kind of spinning like it's the first time they've ever been asked that question, that might be a little insightful that they're less aware of everybody else around them, like especially if you're recruiting salespeople, you can kind of see how they participated in a culture of sales, previously. But yeah, that thought-provoking is probably, if you went into that specific piece of the interview with that question in mind, you'd probably have a lot of the answers to it. Okay, anybody else? So let's just try and walk through this so you guys are familiar with it. Who's never seen a KPA fully? Who's never gone through someone's KPA with them? Who's gone through all 4 main chunks of a KPA with people? A couple times. Cameron, how many times have you done it? Yeah, Novely, a bunch. Shoni, probably a bunch. Matt, have you gone through it with someone fully?
Not all the way.
Cameron, not all the way. Mikhail, you? Okay. So right out the gate, this is called the job fit report. So there's usually a front section that they give you that you're supposed to kind of go through it and understand who the candidate is before you even have the next interview with them. So that's kind of what the summary is all about. Here's, Jonny has an overall fit for the job of regional director. I'm high on that. You can see these ranges. You want that behavioral attribute where that black dot is to fall within the predetermined range of the behavior. So, all right, I'm interviewing Jonny. I already know assertiveness, spatial visualization, vocabulary. You hit some of these. Oh, okay, responsiveness. I'm out of that range. I'm on the higher side. So why is that? Because you got 2 jobs during the behavioral verification portion, which is the first step. Is you're trying to verify that the behavior actually falls within the range. You're just trying to double check that's accurate. And where it falls out of range, you're trying to determine, is that accurate? Why does it fall out of range? And how challenging could that be for this role? And they have high impact, medium impact, and lower impact. So high impact, you can't be an RD, team leader, or an OP without an incredible assertiveness. Like, you've got to have a high assertiveness. Like, if you're just a doormat, good luck trying to have all those difficult conversations or lead or be the, a lone maverick every once in a while. Like, if I'm, down here, even adaptability, like I blaze my own trail. I'm not the best rule follower. You tell me what to do, I'll hear a part of it, and then I'll be going executing it the way I want. Clearly, they want me somewhere on the middle ground, because if I'm too much of a maverick, I don't fall in line in a regional director role too much, and we kind of have way entrepreneurial, way corporate yes people in these RD roles. They kind of want you in the middle a little bit. Who had a hand?
If we wanted to learn like more specific examples of like how these attributes look like in real life, does it talk about it more?
Yeah. Yep. So it'll actually go through and give, that's part of verifying this. And that's why I say practice on each other is so easy and important. It helps you understand yourself, have someone walk it through with you. Probably when my kids, 12, 13, 14 is probably young. I might at 16, 15-ish start thinking about just doing it with my kids so they can learn about themselves. I think that's one of the biggest disasters we have in the academia of America, is just we don't help them understand who they are early enough in their life. Like Germany, some of these other European countries that are kicking our butt in educational systems, they're doing a lot of this early on that helps determine a career path for them very early on. Like almost by like junior high-ish, they know exactly what they want to be. You talk to even a kid in college right now, what do you want to be? They're like, I don't know, I'm just going to school because my parents make me, right? So here you can start, this is where assertiveness. Jonny is enterprising and assertive. He has a confidence in his ability to take action, blah, blah, blah. This is all just still part of the review. So I go through and flip through this. My goal's 20, maybe 30 minutes reviewing this before I get in the meeting, because I need to know what concerns I'm looking for versus just showing up to the first appointment and then just what pops up, right? Operating style, I just read all this, descriptive review, job considerations. So this is where, all right, responsiveness, I'm on the high end. The responsiveness job target is medium. So these are my mismatches. So it pops up the mismatches first. Responsiveness job target is medium. People with medium responsiveness can be expressive and enthusiastic at times, but they can also contain their responses when they feel it is appropriate. Jonny has a higher responsiveness. So here's some of the potential considerations when you're going through this. He may be intolerant or expressive if things slow down for long periods of time at work. Okay, so how do I handle that? Do I go just ring the bell at everybody and tick them all off, and then they just get sick of me and they want me out, He may find himself often and unintentionally at the center of attention as a result of his expressive-ness. It is very hard for me for a conversation to start going sideways in a meeting and for me not to speak up. Like me being quiet in meetings, especially when it's my peers and people. Adaptability, you can see. The adaptability job target is medium. People with medium adaptability is generally concerned about others' feelings and thoughts and may take these into account when deciding what to do or say. Jonny scored somewhat below the adaptability target, so he may sometimes miss social cues. I may miss them or I may not care about them, right? He may sometimes unintentionally irritate people. Those of you who work for me, I've never irritated you. Boyd's never irritated anybody either. I don't know. He usually keeps to himself his thoughts, emotions. It's helpful. Traits, behavior. So this is the spectrum. So this is probably the one you would want to see is here's high, determined, persistent, direct, maybe confrontational and stubborn. On the low of assertiveness, like that just gives you the scale so you know what's high and low on each of these. And again, there's no right or wrong because you are who you are. There might be some weaknesses that could come out, but most of the time you're just trying to find the right positional match for your behavior. The story I always tell is, I grew up wanting to be an FBI agent. So when I got off my mission, I jumped into UVU and got into the accounting program because that was one of the 4 ways to get in the FBI. You can go criminal justice, you can go law enforcement, like accounting was one. I'm assuming white collar crime and all that sort of thing. And so I jumped in the accounting program and I knew it would be a good backup plan if I didn't know what I was going to do, because you always need nurses and accountants in the world, especially right now because tech sucks so many of the millennial generation into their industries. But I realized quickly that accounting was a mismatch of my behavior. Like, it's so analytical, it's so cross T's and I's, which even at that time, I thought I was a little bit more like that. I am like a bottom line, just tell me what you're getting at. I don't want all the details. So like I went from a very A student all through high school, even in my generals, to a C, maybe barely get my C minus just to move on to the next class in accounting because it was so different from my behavior. And had I known that, I might have chose a different route, right? So now once you get through that summary, you jump into the consulting guide. So this is legitimately the packet. Becky, especially for you learning about this, this is the guide that I walk step by step through the entire process with a candidate. And there's 4 major interviews. If you can see this, let me zoom in. The 4 main interviews, you never delegate interviews. If that person's going to be reporting to you, you're going to be holding them accountable. Whoever is the hire also has to naturally transition into the leader of whoever that is. So like if I have, Caitlin, who's my director of lead gen, so I usually coach and meet with her on a recurring basis. Her hiring like a marketing assistant, she would never delegate that to me. She's got to learn this process because she's going to be the one holding them accountable. Even Nova Lee, she would always want my opinion. So sometimes I'd still meet with someone on like a perspective basis. She had to make the ultimate decision for any staff that she was going to be holding accountable. But the 4 main chunks: job fit verification, which is you're going through their behavior, which we'll hurry and jump through a few of these. You're going through what's their natural behavior, where there could be mismatches for the behavior required for a specific position. Thought process. Can I tell a funny story? When before I was hired as team leader, when Boyd came in, hired someone, they quit after a few months. They were looking for the next team leader. Clay and I were just selling real estate. One of our partners at that time was a guy named Ron. Incredible guy, salt of the earth, very humble. He was just not an outgoing. He was not a aggressive person. They were having an owners meeting, and it was Jimmy Rex, Alan, Ron, and Boyd in this meeting. And one of them, Alan, brought up, he's like, hey, we want, I think Ron should be considered for the team leader position. And Jimmy, he laughed out loud and he looked around the room. He's like, are we seriously considering Ron for the team leader job? He's like, he's nowhere near a team leader behavior. And that was part of it. He just knew him long enough that he could have that relationship. But you're trying to verify, will their natural behavior be successful for the behavior required in a position? Agents, I've been surprised continually. You can have all across the board and be successful in real estate because most of the time their sphere of influence accepts who they are. They know who they are. Everybody's got friends. Everybody's got, ways of doing things. There's been a bunch of agents that surprised me. Like Becca's one. Like she came in so, whatever the word is, she talked back to me all the time. I'm like, hey, you should go do this. This is a great idea. And she's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm like, oh, okay, good luck. She just was not, she didn't want to be outgoing. She didn't want to make phone calls. She didn't want to do any of that. Well, she surprised me because she's just so organized and she's so steady and systematic. Even her SOI, she started out with like 80 or 120 people, and she was making $300,000-$400,000 in a handful of years. But she surprised me that she was able to find how to generate business consistently in her behavioral style, right? But that's what job fit is. Thought process is more the open-ended questions. We'll go through that. I've actually just fallen in love with this the last couple of years. I think that was just a check off for me, but I really like to slow down on that one now. The life story and then the motivational was more future, and then his track record. These 4 minimum, you should spend probably an hour in each one of these. So even if you're flying doing this process, you should probably be with them for 4 hours, maybe 2 meetings. You're slamming out 2 and then slamming out another 2. I've been as long as 12 to 15 hours in those 4 sections. You guys know I'm Tim Hewlett. Just the life story was 3.5 hours long. He was really good at talking about his himself.
I have to be very careful with the life story because, believe it or not, I am an empathetic person, and if I have someone that's a good fit on the job fit verification, and then they tell me their life story, and it's heartbreaking to me, I have learned this lesson because I was interviewing someone for my assistant job, and he had this horrible story, and I knew I could help this guy. I was going to save him, and it was going to generationally, they would look back and him getting on here was going to be this awesome thing, right? So I brought Jonny in just to meet him. And afterwards, Jonny said, Lee, what are you doing? I'm like, I know, but I can fix him. I can help him, and it's going to be good. And I hired that guy, and it was the worst decision I have made in my entire life. And eventually, when I had to terminate him, he turned me into the division for mismanaging the trust account. And I spent 100 hours going back and reviewing my trust account from 2007 when it was started till 2019. Now I passed the audit with flying colors. But I learned such a lesson from that.
And now he's our agent service coordinator.
It's actually perfect. I would love to just hear your thought process on this, Jonny. Like, why do you spend? Because when I initially hear that, and I'm sure some of these people in the room are feeling this too, is like that's a lot of time commitment. But like, what's the cost of the bad hire when we skip through this process? We're trying to just say like, let me just wrap it up in 45 minutes or 1 hour interview, and then I hire somebody.
Yeah, my default answer used to be the higher level position. Like the higher requirement is that you can't cheat any of this. Like the cost of hiring someone bad, like even a team leader. A team leader comes in for 6 months. You spend all this time coaching them, training them, send them down to Austin. All the time with your mega agents and all that stuff. Like typically when we talk about the cost of a bad hire when it comes to a team leader role, usually the OP can pretty analytically get to at least $1 million. You talk to a director of lead gen, the first full-time hire for an agent is always one of the hardest because they don't spend enough time in doing the work to hire. They don't have enough experience. They end up just hiring the person they like the most or the best 7 that, came in for an interview. And it's just catastrophic. And then they just keep churning over that same full-time admin over the next 10 years. And they just stay at this $100,000, $200,000 level for their entire career. Cameron, like Red Sign's pretty in momentum right now, but Cameron was that guy for us. He was the right hire at the right time for us that just really was such a foundation for him. And we had churned through probably 9 assistants before Cameron. And we just kept staying at the same level, and until you bring someone in that's truly talent, you might be able to minimize the costs, but what you're missing is the opportunity costs. Like had we not made the right hire, it could have cost us millions of dollars of future income because we would have just stayed at that level. And even, but my answer now is just like, I just get so sick of just turning over people or just setting expectations. You get pulled in, you got to inspect them, or just no systems, carry over for one person. Like it's hard to almost have any employee at this point that you're not going through this process. And I think at that point, that's where you got to have org chart built out in a way that you do have a couple people that then can be the person that's hiring this, so it doesn't all fall on you. But even like you've seen, like a ATL or a front desk person or something, like it probably has cost hundreds of thousands of dollars because now your time's just sucked back into that 6-month time period. And you have to slow down to hire them, which is the number one challenge why we don't do it, is because, hey, you want me to take 20 hours a week out of my 50-hour week already that's full, which is a challenge, but training them, all that type of stuff. So I don't know, millions of dollars, I'm sure that bad hires cost me.
Find that when you're interviewing people, there's pushback on how much time they're willing to spend during the interview process? Like, is there kind of this expectation of how long it will take, or will the good hires just?
Hey, I always warn them. I say, hey, Matt, before we get going, I have to apologize. This is a lengthy process. You'll feel like this is an FBI background check or something. But I'll tell you, the process that we go through is incredibly unique, but it is incredibly powerful. Number one, we're interviewing each other. So I want to make sure you're the right fit, because this isn't about just this job for me. This is about like changing like my people's lives and putting them on a trajectory to accomplish whatever they want. At the same time, this is an incredible value piece to you, because you'll probably get to know yourself more through this process than any other process you've been in. And I'll sometimes share some of my own insights on that. So even if we don't end up getting together, the time that we spend together will be worth your time commitment. And most people, once you at least give them a little bit, like they'll hang in there, and I usually just say, look, I'm going to be in this process for weeks or even a month or whatever. I try to give them some sort of expectation of time, but I know we're all talking about how we're interviewing them. You got to make sure that you're leaving 10, 15, 20 minutes or something of your interview time to recruit them to stay in the process a little bit too. Sharing more about you, our organization, like what this role can go into, the vision you have for your company. You got to just dot some of those in just so they stay hunkered into the process. But once you start digging in, even the first one and some of the insights they have, like they're pretty energized to show up the next time, even unattached to the job description. So it always ends up being positive. I don't think I've ever had someone ticked off when I didn't choose them as the role about the time that we spent together, unless I made a mistake misleading them.
I've actually gone through lots of KPAs with people and realized that I actually haven't hired them. Like we've chosen not to, and almost all of them have thanked me for the process because they very much there's way more self-awareness when they walk away, and it just wasn't the right person for the role that they were looking for.
Yeah, or I'll go through the process and then I'll realize they're not a candidate for this, and I'll kind of unplug it and be like, I got to have this conversation. Like, I really don't feel like you're the right fit for this role, but out of this process, let me tell you what I do think you might be fit for. And then I'll introduce them to someone or a different path that, a lot of times could change their life if they go down that road. So every time I go to hire someone, at least one person gets hired by someone else from the candidates I procure. You just got to make sure you're paying attention in our KW world. Okay, we'll just zip through some of this stuff, but again, it tells you how to start the interview, how to, introduce the verification, yada, yada. Oh. Wait for it. What the freak? All right, we got to download it. I just want to hit like one or two questions on each of those. You have downloads in here? Great.